Hey everyone, welcome back. Today we're going to take a look at a Gloom HILDRYN build. Now why would exactly we want to do this? Well, this is because she has a way of sustaining it infinitely herself. What ability will we place it over? Well, first let's take a look. Balefire is her exalted pistols. These are very strong weapons that don't have too much use in the build, but this actually will not be the ability we're replacing today. Her 2 pillage is the bread and butter of her entire kit, as well as the builds I'll show you later. It does armor and shield stripping and regenerates her shield as well as a light CC. 3. Her Haven is also another very important ability that will get extensive use. It increases your survivability as well as improving the recharge on your shields. Finally, her 4, Aegis Storm. Now normally this ability is very good at generating energy orbs, however you can't activate any abilities while you're in your Aegis Storm, including Gloom, so this is actually the ability we're going to be taking off today. Her pillage will be essential to keeping up the uptime on our Gloom. It will also allow us to abuse our passive, which is a special kind of shield gate on HILDRYN that has a longer duration. Therefore, you have nearly infinite sustainability, since as soon as you get any shields back, you can regenerate it all with pillage. So let's take a look at her full kit with Gloom. As I said before, we're placing it over her 4. The current drain you see is actually with the new hotfixes that arrived yesterday, so these are higher than the expected drain Gloom should have once the second pass of buffs come. Currently, with the first set of changes, Gloom is actually acting in a nerfed state compared to what it was originally. Her pillage will not only be used to sustain her Gloom, but actually as a form of crowd control and armor stripping. Now I have 2 builds to show you today, with the second one being a full armor strip while not gimping out her kit and still leaving Gloom functional. So let's jump into the first one. The first thing you'll notice about this build is it has a very specific amount of strength, 243 in fact. Now why is this? Well, 243 strength on your Gloom translates into a 85% slow, but there is a way to push this further. We're running growing power on the build since HILDRYN does not make good use of brief respite and rolling guard, since shield is her energy. We're also going to be running Prime Sure-Footed as everybody hates knockdowns, and this is very dangerous on her since when she's knocked down, her shields can be depleted, which would deactivate her abilities and make her susceptible to dying. Adaptation is super important since we don't have shield gating and armor doesn't work on shields, therefore damage reduction is our best option. We're going to be using Gloom alongside Pillage. This is actually one of those few ability combinations where you can regenerate energy while you're under the effect of Gloom's drain. This makes HILDRYN another one of those select few frames that can actually keep it up indefinitely. But that's not all. HILDRYN actually excels here because growing power lets you hit that 95% slow cap easily without having to mod for 271 strength. On top of that, her energy regain skill is also a form of CC, also strips armor, improving your time to kill and not making your alpha damage completely useless. You're no longer entirely reliant on slash. For this reason, we're also slotting on Blazing Pillage, which scales with strength for the extra amount of shields restored. Our strength is high enough that pretty much any single time we cast her 2, she'll go back up to max shield, so we'll be able to take full advantage of this by having both her Haven and her Gloom active at all times. Now a crazy build like this needs crazy stats to sustain it. This is why we're running Prime Continuity to go back way positive on our duration, especially because of how Gloom has uncapped enemy limit on the drain currently. We also want extra range, so together both of these stats will allow her Gloom to spread further and faster, while still not having to worry about HILDRYN'S shield economy. Now the reason why we had to run such high duration to counteract the efficiency is because we chose to save slots by running Blind Rage and Umbral Intensify so that we could hit this 243% strength breakpoint in just 2 strength slots. Now for her Arcanes today, besides Aegis, which is self-explanatory on her, you could run Arcane Fury, which will significantly increase the damage your melee does, or Arcane Strike for the extra attack speed, as melee is the way to go for Steel Path, or you could run Avenger if you need more crits, and then there's options like Guardian, which, surprise surprise, you won't run because shields don't benefit from it. Likewise, Energize doesn't help her shields either and doesn't scale, so we won't be using that. Some people might be thinking using Arcane Barrier, but I feel like the proc chance is way too low to make it worth it, plus you do already have an on-demand shield regen with her Pillage. Aegis is more useful because it prevents her shields from being empty at any given moment, whereas Barrier is just a 1 in a million chance of getting a full shield regen with no sustain on it. but of course since we're keeping her 1 on, this means we should mod out her Balefire Charger. I'm just going with a standard corrosive heat build, just going for flat out damage and some CC with the AoE. You'll see more of this on the second Hildryn build later. Now the next thing we want to do is pick out our companion to bring along with this deal. As Hildryn is completely reliant on her shields, I do want to bring Worm along in case there's a magnetic proc that comes from some source I don't expect. And the gate will block this and prevent my shields from being drained, which is extremely important because no shields means you can't cast abilities, and no abilities and shields means Hildryn's going to die. Also slot on other mons such as Primed Regen and Synth Deconstruct for further survivability. Fired Up will be super useful for the Sentinel weapon we're looking on here. Primed Animal Instinct and Vacuum are pretty self-explanatory, and Assault Mode so they actually use their gun. Now we're going to be bringing the Verglass along for this build, which is basically like a Glaxon beam that procs a shit ton of status. I even have a Riven for this, but it honestly isn't necessary. Anything you can't kill for whatever reason that's close to you will be instantly primed up with 10 viral stacks and infinite heat procs. Now alternatively you could run a Panzer Volpaphyla, which gives you a lot of viral spread. They also technically have infinite survivability since they just come back after they die. This is, I believe, the better choice if you have access to one because you can never say no to AoE viral procs. So let's take a look at how this build plays out. It isn't too different from your standard Blazing Pillage build. You want to cast your 3 first, and because we do want that cap slow, you can cast Blazing Pillage to set up your shields and a little bit of CC. Now you can spray any of them to proc Growing Power and cast your 4. Now you have a permanent 95% slow so long as you can keep it up in a 23 meter radius. Stripping them with Pillage also lowers the armor, which makes it a little bit easier to kill the fodder with your melee if need be. Of course on level cap this won't really matter as much, however do remember there's another build I'm showing you later on. If you do strip enough armor, you can actually kill enemies with normal weapons and non-endless steel path. So here the difference for my queller between pre-pillage and post-pillage is the difference of doing 20% damage and nearly killing them outright. So it is useful even if you don't full strip. Finally, Pillage is a permanent armor reduction, so you can't just stack it multiple times to take out their armor more until they lose everything. I only casted it 4 times here, however on this build it will take 6 casts to completely strip anything. Now speaking about stripping, let's take a look at that second build I mentioned earlier. I did mention a full strip setup, so this is exactly what I'm going to show you. Now this build has even lower duration, but a little bit of efficiency back, so the drain is even higher in the build before, but as you can saw, Pillage gives you an easy 100% refill, so we won't have to worry about that. The Gloom here is already at 95% slow, so you may be thinking, how come your Blind Rage is rank 9? How come you're opting for, say, 80% efficiency? What are you trying to save here? Well, this is actually very important. 289 strength is a special or, well, it's very close. 288 is the magical strength number, and this is because with Growing Power, you hit 313 strength. With 313 strength, you can actually do a full strip armor build I'll show you in a second. The rest of the build still carries the same principle even though there are slight differences. We have less range, but this is the penalty we took to run a full strip setup. For our Arcanes, I'm choosing to run Arcane Strike here since we are going to strip all the armor. You don't really need much more damage from Fury since we already have Condition Overload and it's actually going to do meaningful damage without armor. So I've been saying full strip the whole time, now it's time to show you how to do this. Well, it's an Nidus Spectre. So Nidus Spectres tether you as their priority when you first spawn them with their Parasitic Link, which gives you a 28% multiplicative bonus. At 289 strength, if you proc Growing Power like this, you go up to 314. And now with the Link, you're at 401 strength. If I press my 2 for Pillage, everything gets full stripped. This build, if you're looking for level cap setups, is even more viable than the first build. This build I would say is even more suitable for endurance because it can full strip armor consistently like this. Now you might be wondering, what about the Spectre? Can't it die? Well, within your 95% slow aura, it's very unlikely it's going to get hit much if at all. Plus, remember, health scaling is actually faster than damage scaling. And with the Steel Path modifiers, your Spectres are affected as well. They even get 2.5 times extra armor and health, so he literally will never die. Even if he does, you can just spawn him again, as the longer you are into the mission, the higher the levels ramp up, and the tankier everything gets relatively, meaning it's even less likely to die if you respawn it later on. The remaining footage in this video is just a showcase of the 2 separate builds on Steel Path. The first one is the 243% strength setup. You can see me proccing my Growing Power with Kuva Nucor and then casting my 95% slow. Then I cast my Haven, which has pretty much a permanent uptime at this point, and you can just hack away with your melee. Once you start running lower on your shield, you can just cast your Pillage. You can cancel the cast by immediately deactivating it, which will instantly refill your shields because you only really need 5 enemies or so to do that, and with the increased spawns in Steel Path, honestly, you're gonna have 0 problems there. However, as I said, the armor does get stripped low enough that if you do have a heavy hitting weapon like the Queller that's built right, you can still kill enemies on regular Steel Path. Now say an Acolyte spawns and deactivates your abilities, or you run out of shields. Don't panic, you do have a lot of shield gate on Hildryn, more than normal frames. At this point, all you have to do is dodge a little bit, or stay in your operator mode until you get some shields back. Then you can cast your Pillage and instantly recoup nearly 5,000 in over shields, and you're straight back into business. Now let's take a look at the second build. Once you start the mission, the first thing you want to do is drop your Spectre. I would only really recommend using this setup on a endless Steel Path, since it's kind of a waste otherwise, as you don't really have any reason to strip armor on this build on a normal Steel Path mission. You can immediately cast your Slow since it's at 95% already while you're waiting for your Nodus to tether you. Once he does, you proc your Growing Power and then cast your Pillage. Instant full strip. So long as you stay within range of the link, you're perfectly fine, as your Nodus follows you and it reaches out to 40 meters. There's really nothing that stops you from just full stripping enemies throughout the entire course of the mission, meaning the level scaling will never matter. Now unfortunately the Acolytes are immune to your Pillage, but they still are affected by your 95% slow like normal, so you can just keep hacking away at them with your melee after you prime them up, since they can't really get away from your DOTs. So that's all that I want to show you today with this new Hildryn Gloom build. I feel like this is another really handy Gloom synergy, and she is probably one of the few frames that can still take full advantage of Gloom even with the increased drain and missing enemy cap calculation that's currently on the ability with the botched buff that DE placed on it. So if it works this well right now, you can only imagine how easy it's going to be to use once DE passes the second set of buffs to Gloom. She's pretty up there with the Garuda Gloom build I showed you a couple days ago. If this is your first time watching, feel free to leave a like, or better yet subscribe. Let me know your thoughts down in the comments. 75.8% of you are not subscribed. I'm trying my best to bring you all the information I can about Tempestarii and any of the future updates that may be coming up. I'll also make sure I'm the first that can show you any new fancy tricks or builds that you haven't seen before, just like this one. So you really don't want to miss out. That'll be it for this video. Thank you all for watching, and see you all next time.